We talked about the transfer of the tight end coming in, what it does for Carson Beck, Heisman odds. This just in, he's not winning the Heisman. No Georgia quarterback ever will, but go ahead on and bet on it, and the odds increase. Today, we're going to talk about the other transfers who are coming to Georgia and where they rank in the whole manner of a loaded offense. And this just in, a pretty loaded defense, too, next on Locked On Bulldogs.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. He is Clint. I am Daniel. Thanks to FanDuel for sponsoring today's episode. More on them in a bit. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for following along this entire off season. We've got tons to talk about, and a lot of it has to do with the names that we're going to mention today, because Georgia not only went out there, Clint, and out-recruited everybody in God's known world, but they also went ahead and went out there and didn't sign the most transfers in the NCAA. Georgia never does that. Not interested in doing that. Not the model of how we're trying to build a program. You tell me the team that wins national championships that does that, and then I will.
Well, A&M made the playoffs last year.
No, they fired their coach because they realized that's not how you win football games. But Georgia did bring in some very key transfers, and so we're going to talk about them today. And not only are we going to talk about them, we're going to rank them from most impactful to least impactful. Now, this is going to be quite an undertaking, but let's go over the names for the people.
By the way,
as we get started,
lists and rankings is what you do in the off season. You just go ahead, throw anything up on a top 8 list and see where people like it and see where it falls.
We've got 3 incoming wide receiver transfers and 1 incoming tight end. So I'm going to lump those all together with the pass catchers. They are London Humphreys, the wide receiver from Vanderbilt, Colby Young, the wide receiver from Miami, Michael Jackson III, not that Michael Jackson, the wide receiver from USC, and Ben Urosic that you talked about yesterday on the pod, the tight end transfer. Big fella, big and athletic. Let me ask you, watching the Super Bowl a couple days ago, did you notice any big athletic tight ends on the field? Did either team possess a large and athletic tight end?
That's unique.
That's interesting.
That's interesting.
That's interesting. So those 3 guys coming in, as well as the oft-mentioned running back Trevor Etienne. That rounds out the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, it is highlighted by Xavier McLeod, the defensive lineman from South Carolina, who I feel like got a little overlooked in the
we about to rectify that.
We're about to look. We're about to have a look. And Jake Pope, defensive back safety from Alabama, who comes over to join his former defensive backs coach and now current defensive backs coach here at Georgia. So, Clint, as we talk about those players, it's 5 on the offense. It is 2 on the defense. Where do we want to start? Most impactful player, transfer player coming into Georgia this year. Who do we have?
It is not. We've said this all off season. This is not a particular need for Georgia. But Daniel, I just have a very simple question for you. The last 3 years at Georgia, ever since we took Oklahoma to the mat down in Pasadena and came roaring back to win that game, what have you and I been jonesing for on the offensive side of the football? Not just good running backs or a good running game. Explosive long
There it is.
runs.
Yes. Not even great. Don't hear us say great running backs a la Nick Chubb's
No.
and Sony Michel's. That's not what we're saying. That would be great, obviously, if we could have one of those. We're not saying Trevor Etienne is that guy.
No.
Not going to put that on him or any young man. But we want the explosive runs, Clint.
That's what I want.
We want the long breakaway, make guys miss, speed in the open field type of running.
And if you're telling me this offense with Carson Beck, with the weapons that he has, with the weapons already returning that were already on the team that I talked about yesterday as well, if you're going to tell me as also that you can't just go ahead and put an extra DB out there and think that you can remove a linebacker, you can go ahead and get in some zone soft coverage to try to go ahead and fool that. You're going to drop 4 into cloud coverage. Oh, here you go. Here's Trevor Etienne running up the middle for 40 yards. Yeah, that's going to go ahead and suck a lot of people up. And now this offense is beyond explosive. Not a need, but I think he is the most talented player we have coming in the transfer portal. I don't think there's much debate about that. There might be one other you can say.
Okay.
But I think talent-wise and impact-wise, we're going to feel it instantaneously on offense, Daniel. That's who my go-to is. Where would you go to for an impact player, top of the chart, maybe number 2?
Yeah, he's definitely the most productive player.
That's a good
that Georgia brings in. Number 2 on this list, I think things get a little tricky. But I'm going to go with London Humphrey, the wide receiver from Vanderbilt.
Okay.
The production, we talked about this when he signed. The production was fair. Nothing to scoff at there at Vanderbilt. But I think the talent and the skill set far exceeds the production. This guy's long. He is athletic. He goes up and high points the football. You look at a guy like Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, fantastic Georgia career, on to the next level, on to the NFL. I'm seeing some non-Georgia people, by the way, saying that Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is the sleeper wide receiver in this draft class, and it's just nice to be heard.
Is it shocking to you, Daniel?
No one is shocked by that.
No.
He's out at Georgia, and you look at the guys that are left. Is there plenty of talent at the wide receiver position? Absolutely there is. Ra Thomas, love it. There's plenty of talent to go around, but not a lot of that talent has the size and body type and skill set that a guy like London Humphrey has. And you combine that with the fact that he has done it week in and week out against SEC defenses.
That's right.
And now you replace his quarterback with Carson Beck. You replace his coaching staff with the offensive staff at Georgia. You replace his offensive line with our offensive line. And all of a sudden, you've got a recipe for this guy to really vault up in the productivity ranks. Now, he's not going to get 1 million targets at Georgia, but impact-wise, I think he could be very impactful for this team.
Couldn't agree more. We're going to come back. We're going to give you the rest of the list, segment 2 and 3, but first, these. These are, in fact, FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel. And right now, listeners can get $150 in bonus bets if your bet of $5 or more cashes. If it wins, you get $150. Pretty simple. Go ahead, bet on something with $5. If it wins, you get $150 in bonus bets right to your account. That's new listeners over at new users over at FanDuel.com.
Can you bet on Georgia choking away a basketball game in the last few minutes?
I didn't say it because I knew he would. I knew he was going to take the
If you could bet on that, you might want to place a wager on that.
You can make a lot of money. Right now, you just go ahead and shoot your shot. March Madness is coming up. NBA is here. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more. Let's continue the list of impact transfers. I agree with you. London Humphreys, I think, by the way, isn't he supposed to be like just a lad replacement, Daniel? He's just supposed to be a lad replacement.
Stop, everyone. Stop, everyone. Stop. Stop it now.
Go.
Not even
Go on.
not even remotely close to the same player.
No.
No.
No, not at all.
Which
All
is
right.
better for Georgia, by the way, because we have some lad replacements on the
We do.
roster. Hello.
We already do.
But we don't have one of him, so that's nice. Yep.
All right. Let's get to some other names. I'm going to go number 3
next?
because this has to be said with the importance of the SEC game still fresh in our mind because that's the last time we saw Florida State. I get it. Bowl game. I get it.
Okay.
Crushed. Came out. Okay, sure. But
that wasn't a real game.
That wasn't a real game. It was against Florida State. Against Alabama, just the absolute soul-crushing, smash-you-in-the-mouth mentality in the trenches that Alabama came with. Xavier McLeod, Daniel, is for me the next impact guy on this team.
Tell the people why.
I think, well, he's a giant human being, first and foremost. Something. Okay, he is huge. He is in a position of, I'll say, need, because we have unproven guys on the depth chart behind some very good players. Missouri Stackhouse, notably, got a couple guys returning, a couple guys coming back. I get it. But on the defensive line, we need depth and you need large guys with high motors. And that's exactly what Xavier McLeod is. Coming over from South Carolina, on the interior of this defense, goes ahead and lets our linebackers do what they do best. We have very athletic and very fast linebackers. We don't have the most physical linebackers in Georgia. That's okay. That's just fine. Monty Rice was fine.
Sound okay to me.
Well, it is when you have a guy like Xavier McLeod sucking up bodies, disrupting in the middle, letting the guys become erasers on the back end, letting guys come downhill and tackle and do what they do best, which is speed. So for me, number 3 is Xavier McLeod. Daniel, where do you want to go for number 4?
See, I don't hate that. That's definitely where I would have gone. And for number 4, I'm going to go to Ben Yurosek. I'm going to go to the tight end down at Stanford. And it's not because I didn't see things that I really loved from the backup tight ends, Lawson Lucky, Pierce Sperlin last season. I did see things that I really enjoyed out of them in albeit brief spurts that they were healthy enough to be on the field. Lawson Lucky obviously dealing with those injuries plagued him for most of the year. I think he's probably was the leader in the clubhouse to be the second tight end. But I think that the transfer from Stanford probably changes the math a little bit on the tight end room because they are different players. I think Lawson Lucky, Pierce Sperlin, and Ben Yurosek. But I think that the proven Power 5 football player that we have in Yurosek is going to outweigh some of the upside and athleticism that you have in these young tight ends. Maybe give them a little bit more time to develop. And I think you're going to see at least 3 tight ends play pretty consistently this year. Now, obviously, Oscar Delp is going to slide into the never come off the field role. He's never going to come off the field if he is healthy and not absolutely gassed. So that is set in stone. But I do think you're going to see a little bit less 2 tight end personnel than you're used to seeing at Georgia because you don't have Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers. You don't have Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp. And so I think and you've got a plethora of wide receivers.
There it is.
And so I think you're going to see a lot more single back, single tight end, 3 wide formations this year than you're used to seeing at Georgia. And when the second tight end is in the game, I think Yurosek is going to get maybe not the lion's share of those snaps, but I think he's going to get a significant number of those snaps. I think he's going to prove impactful for Georgia. He'll score a touchdown this year. Like that's the kind of he'll score a touchdown this year. And in the run game,
here we go.
That's where you're going to see impact that doesn't show up on the Saturday night stat sheet heroes that are just going to be, scanning those stat sheets to figure out who the good football players are. And by those people, I mean NFL GMs.
There it is.
You're not going to find Eurosic's name necessarily on that. But the way that he's going to support in the run game, the way that he's going to handle business, I think he's going to be impactful for this team.
The running game is exceptional. Again, Mackey list at Stanford with not a single player you can name, and David Shaw not coaching. Like, he's going to be good. All right, I'm going to go next. This is really unique. We have a couple of wide receivers and a DB. We're going to come back after this. We're going to let you know where they rank, and we're actually a sleeper. I'm going to put somebody on the back end and say he could actually vault up to top 3 depending on how the season goes. But first, these. And these are eBay Motors, millions of parts for your MVP. Win every time with parts that fit your ride over at ebaymotors.com. eBay Motors has a guaranteed fit for your vehicle. Whether you have a Honda Accord, a Honda Civic, Honda Odyssey, a lot of Honda love on the podcast today.
Those are the options.
These are the options.
Those are your options for vehicles.
I got to make it or make it. These are the options. No, you can get any part for your vehicle. You put the year, the make, the model, whatever it is, Chevy, foreign, domestic, you put it in there. It's going to tell you, yes, this part fits your car.
Guaranteed to fit.
If it doesn't, eBay's going to make it right. They're going to take care of you. No problem. Shop with confidence. Peruse the aisles of eBay Motors. Find the right part, the right fit every single time. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers.
Now, Clint, this is where I would kind of draw a line here on the sheet. Do you disagree with me? I think I would say these 4 guys that we've just talked about in the first 2 segments will be impactful players for the Georgia Bulldogs in this upcoming football season.
Yes.
They will. Period. Yes. Underline it. The next 3 guys could be impactful players for the Georgia Bulldogs in this upcoming football season. And that's, I think, a pretty important distinction.
Yeah, it is. And I think all 3 of them can be spoken about in the same vein. I'm going to put one guy. We have a direct replacement of a guy that I think he could be. Another guy, I'll start with who I'd put on the back end because production hasn't been there as well as opportunity. Skill set has been, but Michael Jackson III, I'm not putting him, again, the line here is just kind of they're all in the same camp. But if he has the opportunity with his catch radius and his percentage, if you look at the real deep analytics of a very small sample size, and he keeps that same sample size going over an expanded period of time, he has the opportunity to be just as sure-handed as the aforementioned Rosemary Jack Saint. He has the opportunity to be that impact player. He's got the size, the skill, the ability. He's at USC. I don't know. Lincoln Riley doesn't do much right, but he does throw the football with efficiency. This is what he can do. Okay.
46 catches, 500 yards, 6 feet, got a little speed on him. Yeah. I like Michael Jackson III as a prospect. But I think he's a prospect. And I think he's in there battling with a lot of these freshman, sophomore wide receivers.
Yes.
That, let's just be honest, Georgia fans. Some of them are going to come out on top and some of them are not. It's not mean-spirited to say that that's what happens at Georgia in recruiting when you recruit these guys. Some of them come out on top, some of them do not, and that is just the way that it goes. So he certainly could elevate himself to a very productive player. What about the wide receiver out of Miami?
Okay. Colby Young, 50-50, red zone, go up and get you some. Miami, notably horrible football school. This is not the 90s.
No. It's and they have possibly the worst in-game football coach that I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, Falcons fan, Kyle Shanahan brings you shivers, but also Mario Cristobal
is way worse.
That's
way
startling.
Worse in-game coach. Great recruiter.
Yep.
Really the worst coach I've ever seen.
So he has an opportunity to come on over. Colby Young has the same lotto ticket feel to him. Daniel could pop in such a big way, going up and getting balls, very physical. 50-50, tall, speedster as well. He's got some top end speed to him, not the shifty jitterbug speed, but top end speed to him.
Sure.
I think he's going to fit in just fine. Daniel, the Jake Pope. What I'm about to say, this correlation is dead on for the impact. I think they can. This is Dan Jackson's replacement. Like Dan Jackson is a replacement for players.
Yeah.
But Dan Jackson, need I remind you, Clemson game a couple years ago to start that. Dan Jackson was a pivotal, and I mean pivotal player in that game. Injuries, didn't have a lot of guys healthy, had to get healthy. He played kind of this rover position back there, and he did a great job. I think Jake Pope can go ahead and do that in a secondary. I don't know if you understand. We have a lot of inexperienced freshmen coming in, so he's going to provide added security blanket, not ceiling, but added security blanket for a lot of these kids, KJ Bolden, Aguero, who need to grow up in a hurry.
Of the three guys that we just talked about, Jake Pope is my favorite prospect for Georgia. And it has a lot to do with what you just said. Depth at the secondary position. It's thin at safety. You comped Dan Jackson, and I don't hate it, but let me give a very strong caveat to that comp. Jake Pope is more talented than Dan Jackson will ever be.
Ever. Correct.
And that's not a knock on Dan Jackson. It is actually the biggest compliment that I could pay Dan Jackson, because what I'll say next is Jake Pope has a long way to go before he gets to Dan Jackson.
I need Jake Pope this year to beat Dan Jackson.
And yet he's way more talented. Dan Jackson, I don't think Georgia fans fully appreciate how much this kid played above his head consistently, week in and week out.
That's right.
Out there against major competition, out there, sometimes on an island, on the back end, having to, be the deepest of the deepest, and really played admirably well. Wasn't afraid to throw his body around. Really, he's the classic example of a guy who took all of his talent and absolutely stretched it as far as he possibly could. And kudos to him. Now, Jake Pope, Georgia fans, much more talented, much more physically gifted, and therefore has a much higher ceiling than Dan Jackson. But what we need to happen is for him to step into that, to rise to the occasion, and to continue to be developed. Now, he's got a little bit of time in college, under Nick Saban at Alabama. You trust that the development is going to be there, that the foundation's already been laid, and then he comes over. T-Rob is now here. That relationship continues. And oh, by the way, it's Kirby Smart, and it's Will Muschamp, and it's Glenn Schumann. It's the big three. If there's a place for you to rise to the occasion and be developed, it's here. Don't be surprised if your favorite young safety on the roster misses out on some playing time because of Jake Pope. Just don't be surprised, Georgia fans.
Don't be shocked. I'm telling you right now.
Don't be shocked. It could happen.
Yes, it could. This has been Locked On Bulldogs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We'll see you guys next time.
We'll see you.